A couple other things before we get to the actual, the heart of the movie. Um, what hurts this movie aside from of the somewhat slow pacing? The Ewoks, right?
Yes.
I remember when I saw it, and how old was I at the time? 15, 16 years old when it came out. I didn't like the Ewoks. And Lucas says that he was very cognizant of the fact that there might be blowback from these little cute bear characters. But his explanation as to why did I insert kid-friendly bear characters? Tell me if you've heard this. So that's the cynical answer, and that could be the accurate answer. But I mean, I can't believe that's it though, because this movie it's a third Star Wars movie. It's going to make $1 bazillion no matter what. It's built-in it's built-in revenue.
It's a really good point.
It's too big to fail. But what he says is, again, he says in my big art original conception that the overthrow of the Empire was to happen from a non-technological society. He wanted a simplistic society like the Ewoks are. Originally, he envisioned that non-technological society to be Wookiees. But then Chewbacca took off as a significant character, and clearly he's technologically advanced because he's the co-pilot of a starship. So Wookiees were out. So how can I what other non-technologically advanced civilization can I put in to serve this purpose of the plot? I'll just downsize the Wookiees by 1/3 or 2/3 to make them 1/3 Wookiee height, and boom, there you go, Ewoks. So that's what he says.
Do you know where the name Ewok comes from?
No.
I didn't either until, honestly, a few days ago. I got a tablet for Amazon Prime Day, and I said, so it has Alexa on it, which I never have used before. So I'm like, Alexa, may the force be with you. And Alexa's like telling me Star Wars trivia and stuff, So
Really?
It said, yeah, it just gives you like trivia, or it'll tell you a joke. So it said, George Lucas came up with the name Ewok by reversing the syllables of Wookiee.
There you go. So that would tend to comport with his story.
Is that amazing?
Yeah.
I never saw that. How did I never see that?
So he says several times in the commentary that Star Wars is always intended to be a lighthearted adventure that never gets too dark, which I kind of dispute because it gets pretty dark in a number of places. We talked about, in the last episode, and also in this movie. But the problem with the Ewoks is it takes the lightheartedness too far for my tastes, and probably for the taste of a lot of other fans as well.
There's a lot of humor in the beginning of this movie, and I think it's necessary because it does get so dark at the end. But there's a lot of humor. Han is a wisecracker the whole way through. He's riding Lando like the whole time they're in that mission briefing. He's like, "Good luck, you're gonna need it." Like what? I mean, he's kind of a jerk. It's like, dude, we're all on the same side here.
Well, there's a time when
right?
He and Luke are on the barge. He's like, "I used to live here, You're
gonna
die
here,
here,
Yeah, I mean, that's not a really nice thing to say. But instead of a big white or dark blur, I see a big light blur. Those kinds of lines are a little forced, but but you see what they're trying to do.
That's Han's function, though.
Now,
that's his character's function.
C-3PO is hilarious. Okay, so in my opinion,
no, he does have some good lines in this movie.
When he's
he gets thrown around, because
he's the sight comedy. Yeah, exactly.
He's disrespected. Nobody likes him.
50,000, no less. Smack.
Yeah.
And he gets thrown down, and then he gets back up. What did I say? And then, but my favorite and probably least quoted line in this movie is, it's not my favorite of the whole movie. It's a really great C-3PO line. Is he runs into R2 on the sail barge. He goes, R2, what are you doing here? Well, I can see you're serving drinks. But it's dangerous here, like.
Yeah. Serving drinks. What does it look like?
I can see you're serving drinks. I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, because
no, that is a good line. I like it.
Because R2 is such a smarty. He's a smart butt, and he's like, I'm serving drinks. What are you doing?
R2's far smarter than 3PO. That's shown time and time again.
And more brave, and he's
everything.
He's the plucky little droid. Like at the end when they got to get into the bunker and it's locked. And they're like, R2, we need you right now. He's like, Like, well, where are you going? Wait, no, come back. It's dangerous, and R2's like, having none of it.
I got work to do, bud.
Yeah,
I
they
got things
called
to
me,
do.
man. They're my masters. I obey,
I
like
got work.
yeah, I gotta
Right.
go.
I'm not like you. You just hang around pissing people off all the time. I do.
Yeah, and
I,
hiding in the bushes.
I get things done.
Yeah. Well, he does have a lot of attachments with which to do that, like an
Many.
unlimited supply.
Unlimited, because all of the various doors, hinges, whatnot, as we talked about before, anything could come out.
He's the Swiss Army knife.
Swiss Army knife of the Star Wars.
Yeah, he's the champion. You ever see I have a black champion, one of my favorite prized possessions, which I thought I lost the other day because somebody broke into my car, but it's okay. It wasn't in the glove box. It was in my bag. So I'm like, yes. Bought it with my first paycheck and my first job, where, to tie this in, I worked at a movie theater, and when Jedi came out, it was in that movie theater for a long time. I have seen parts of this movie so many times.
Yeah.
The end especially, but I've seen so many parts of this movie because, it was 1983. I was the right age, and it was and I was working there, so I could watch it pretty much at will.
Of course. What a magical time in movie history that was. So maybe you feel that way just because whatever period in which you're a child and pop cultural events occur, you feel that way. But I mean, in 1980 or 79, Alien.
Yeah, great movie.
Superman. Then Empire, Raiders.
Yeah.
Jedi, a second Indiana Jones movie.
Blade Runner.
Which
I had to beg my father to take me to see Blade Runner. It was rated R, and he's like, what? And I read the book and everything, and it was rated R, and there was violence, but it was rated R because there were a couple scenes where somebody was topless. I mean, it wasn't even that big a deal. Like, for me as a kid, it was a big deal.
Totally.
But
I remember that
wasn't
very well.
like
82
full-frontal nudity or anything.
No, 82, Wrath of Khan. So there were just this whole raft of big sci-fi fantasy movies that came out that are now cultural classics and touchstones.
Yeah.
So anyway,
all of which we will talk about right now. No, I'm just kidding.
There was one other
Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which is what that's from.
Well, that was 87, right?
That was 85, actually. 85.
Oh, maybe the sequel was in 87.
Yeah.
Anyway,
big time.
I'm not really a movie. I'm not a movie trivia person. So for anybody, if anybody on Earth is watching this, you know the correct answer. I'm sure
it's well, yeah, because you can Google it while we're here and we're talking. So you have that advantage over us. Alex Trebek with all the answers, but also
don't tweet at Gern Blanston. Don't.
I worked from 83 to 85 in the movie theater. So pretty much anything that came to that theater, I pretty much, unfortunately, things like Terms of Endearment and I mean, there's so much bad stuff. Schlock. Anyway, let's get to the
so what other reasons why Jedi is less satisfying than Empire, which is the perfect Star Wars movie? It repeats themes, and there's a lot of I remember when I first saw it, I thought, I feel like I've seen a lot of this movie before, which was disappointing. Another Death Star, disappointing. Another mission to blow up that Death Star. However, Lucas talks about this in the commentary. And again, if you believe him, where he says, I had this all planned out, and he makes a comment about one of the reasons he wanted a non-technological civilization to overthrow the Empire was because he was writing these ideas during the Vietnam War. Right. So he's really getting deep here and making all these linkages, which I'm skeptical of, but that's just me.
There's one Vietnam War link that I did find. He created a planet called Utapau.
The prequels, yeah.
Yeah, well, it showed up in the prequels, but I guess if you go back to one of his original drafts of Star Wars, Utapau is in there. I forget which planet it was replaced with. I don't know, but actually there was a air base in Thailand that the United States used during World War, and it was called Utapau. And I don't know how it came up on YouTube. Somehow YouTube read my mind at some point and just threw up this 30-second thing, and it was like, oh my God. That's serendipitous, it was really weird.
So there you go. There are all the shrimp, plate of shrimp.
We'll do that one day. That would be funny.
I would love to rewatch that movie because I haven't watched it in easily 30 years.
I just rewatched it maybe 2 weeks ago.
But in the 80s, I watched it dozens and dozens of times.
Yeah, but it was the ultimate 80s movie. It was like anarchy, punk rockers, aliens. There was just, Harry Dean Stanton. I mean, like it was Emilio Estevez, like not being
cover
like
that
one of the
one.
Brat Pack. Huh?
Let's do that one. We'll do that another time. I like that.
Yeah,
idea.
let's do it. Let's be quiet on
it gives me an excuse to rewatch it. So,
right.
But repeat on the Death Star, and he says that in my original conception, the finale of this story arc was the grand final battle would take place on the Death Star. He says, well, unfortunately, I blew the Death Star up in the first movie. What he never says, and what I have to believe is true, is I don't know why he won't just come out and say this, is that when I made the first movie, I figured this would be it. There would never be another one.
Sure.
He never says that. He always talks about like, well, I always conceived this. Come on.
Here's what happens. This just happens to so many people. They tell a lie and then they can't back down.
Right.
And then the more they reinforce it, the more they can't back down. They can't. And it's just so, okay, here's a great scene. This is a scene I know you love because you've already mentioned Carrie Fisher's acting in this. They're in the Ewok village. They just become members of the tribe. Luke ducks out onto the another catwalk. Star Wars, they're always like so far above the ground. What the heck's going on with that? Yeah. And then out comes Leia, and she's like, "What's up?" And he's like, "Tell me about your mother."
Mm-hmm.
What
do you remember about?
Tell me about your mother. No, I'm just kidding. He's like, "Yeah, what do you remember about your mother?" He said, "Well, just like flashes, really. She died when I was very young."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She died during childbirth in episode 3.
Right.
That the continuity doesn't work.
Yeah. But that see, that's okay for me. And what I
fine
wish
with me too. I can suspend my
what I wish he would
admit
say.
it. Admit
What
it.
exactly? What
Just
I wish he would
admit it.
just say is that
We're fine.
I have the general arc, but there's a lot of little details that I didn't have them worked out, and I had to work them out in successive movies. Cool.
Leia is 2 years older than Luke in Star Wars. That's the way it is. And then later they're twins. And so, because it made more sense to write them as twins in Return of the Jedi. So when they get to that, they're like, yeah, well, it was your twin and we hid her away,
Right.
But
so we know that he didn't plan for this because if there's consistency, and I'm going to be super dweeby here. And this is a plot point I don't care about at all.
We haven't done that before.
Yeah. None of these nitpicky things matter to me because it's a movie. It's not a documentary, but it's fun to talk about them as if they are documentaries, which is what we're doing. So we know that he's backfilling his own story about how the genesis of how he created this universe, because in the original Star Wars, Vader tortures Leia. Yes. He tortures her. He's torturing his own daughter.
Yes.
Never once does he feel any kind of force connection with her at all.
No. Nope.
So, and yet we know that he has this connection with Luke. He just feels it, but he never feels that with Leia.
There is a moment I could really stretch this, and this is totally me and my imagination. It has no basis in any kind of reality that I've ever heard anywhere. So we already talked about, why is Leia she's in her robes on Bespin, and then all of a sudden she's back in her Hoth uniform, right? Like, what happens there? Apparently there's some interaction with Vader, but we don't know what, and then later during the scene that I'm talking about on the catwalk, when Luke says, I'm sorry, that's not true. It's in the cockpit. When Luke says Vader's on that ship.
Yes.
Leia gets this look on her face. Her eyes brighten up. Her eyes widen, and she gets this look on her face,
really?
Haunting look. Something as if something happened.
That's interesting.
I'm just going to imply that something, I don't know what, I'm just going to say something could have happened. And I have that's all I'm going to leave it at.
I like that detail. I like
the idea that there might be something going on behind the scenes psychologically that impacts her. And then later.
I do too because hold that thought.
Yeah,
the reason I like that is that the psychology that's going on amongst the characters that's kind of like under the surface
Yeah.
is one of the things that, as we talked about, makes Empire compelling. It's not
Yeah.
just a fun shoot 'em up. There's some deep stuff going on in interpersonal relationships here. I like that.
And it can be reinforced if you're going to follow that thread when Luke's on the catwalk in the Ewok village with Leia, when he says, Vader's here on this moon.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, what? And then he says, I have to confront him. He's my father.
Mm-hmm.
The expression on her face, she actually physically moves back, and she has this look of like repulsion on her face.
It is repulsion.
That's what I read. I read like, oh my God, you're related to that
I totally agree.
Monstrosity, that aberration, that abhorrent, terrible, for a moment.
And it's really interesting that Luke has made the decision not to reveal this information. He goes all through Han's rescue and the planning for the assault on the Death Star without ever telling anybody that Vader's his father. That's pretty bold, man.
Yeah. Well, it has to. I mean, it has to.
I think
scream.
Of course, yeah. But I think the rebellion deserved to know.
I think that would be something I would tell the rebellion.
Yeah, because if it came out later and they're like, "You knew this? What kind of person? What kind of person are you?"
Scandalous.
But yeah, so in the commentary for that scene, which I found to be a very powerful scene, I like it. Lucas doesn't like it because he regards it as it's exposition. Exposition is clunky.
His exposition is clunky.
Yeah. And it's all dialogue, and you just have to get it out there because you have to tell the audience about these things.
In the hands of a master, it can be really good. And Lucas does it good sometimes, but you're right.
Well,
for the most part, he doesn't.
But so
he doesn't even write dialogue great in it. You know what I mean? Like some of his dialogue is really bad.
His dialogue's horrible. And the prequel showed that because he directed all three, and he directed Star Wars, but he didn't direct the two successive movies. Richard Marquand directed Jedi.
Right.
So
Irving Kershner directed.
And Irving Kershner.
Yeah, he was great.
I think made Empire what it was. I mean, he had a way of getting it done. That's just not where Lucas's skills lie. It's just not. He's very much like
he's a storyteller.
He is to Star Wars what Roddenberry was to Trek.
He's the creator,
brilliant
and
at creating
genius.
Brilliant at creating the universe, but the universe in his hands is maybe not well served.
Here's a tip to Marquand. Okay, here's a tip to Marquand. When the shuttle Tidarian the stolen rebel shuttle is trying to get access. They've given the clearance codes
it's an older code, but it checks out.
Yeah. Yes. I know. And he plays that so flat, just not in a bad way. Like he doesn't get in the way of the dialogue. Like, look, I'm a Star Wars character. He just plays it like
it's Piet, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he's one of the few Imperials that survives to another movie.
Yeah. And he's doing his job, and he knows he's doing a good job. So he has nothing to fear from Vader. And he's like, shall I detain them? No. What do you want us to do? Just give me the order. I'll do it for you. Like he's not like afraid of Vader at this point. He's not like, he's just doing his job. And I like that. So like it's calm, because you don't want that in that scene. What you want is, what you're focusing on is Vader's mask, and Vader's trying to make a choice because he's just been ordered by the Emperor to stay on the command ship and await orders. Now his son, he can detect his son. And like you were talking about with Leia, is it proximity? Because they're flying really close right after Han says, don't get too close, Chewie. Fly casual.
Fly casual.
Don't look like you're trying to keep your distance, but keep your distance, fly casual. But they fly almost exactly at that time, right past the bridge where presumably Vader is. And he's standing there. Marquand has the camera down here, and we're looking up at the triangle of Vader's mask, and then the upper triangle forms a diamond, and he's thinking, as if he's thinking.
Right. It's another mask. Another mask scene.
But also, that's the way the rest of us, normal-sized human beings, would see Vader. Exactly. We'd be looking at Wilt Chamberlain.
Yes.
We'd be like, he's towering over us. Yeah. We would see that view. I've never seen that view in any other scene except that scene. It was a really great scene. I thought that was a director's choice. Maybe it was the director of photography, but I think it was beautiful because it gives us that pensiveness, and it also gives us a realistic idea of, what it would be like to be in the room with Vader.
And again, with a character that has no facial expression, getting the audience to read the emotion from the character that you want, it's tricky.
And especially even in the delivery, even in James Earl Jones's delivery of those lines, he's like, do they have a code clearance? There's nothing like really that you can pull out of that, except that he does it slowly, almost pensively,
Well, it to me, it was, he wasn't even sure of himself.
Right. He's making a decision on the fly.
He's making a decision on the fly, but it was almost as if he wasn't really sure that Luke was there. He thought he might be there, but he wasn't certain.
I can buy that. Yeah, I can buy that there's a certain amount of doubt. And in fact, the Emperor reinforces that when he goes back to the Emperor and he says, I told you to remain on the command ship. And he's not happy about him being there. And he says, are you sure that your feelings on this matter are
clear on this matter? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
White. So,
yeah, clear.
Something like
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another Death Star had to be built, although I would think that for the sake of not making it seem like a direct repeat of a film that just happened 2 films ago, you could have come up with another super weapon. But he chose not to do that for some reason.
At least he makes it partially built, which gives it some character.
Right. And it makes sense because we're asked to believe that of course, in the original movies, you don't know this. You don't know how long it took to build the Death Star. You only know from the prequels that it was a probably multi-decadal effort to build this
25 years or something.
massive thing.
I don't remember.
Yet, with Death Star 2, they've made great progress in what, 6 years.
Yeah, and it's more powerful too. Like the recharge is more powerful or something of that nature.
But just from a special effects perspective, the realism of a partially completed giant sphere, it's like, why in 2001, another one of my favorite films, the space station isn't complete. It would have been very easy for Kubrick to decide, we're just going to show a complete space station. Of course, why every science fiction film up to that point would have done that. But because every decision he made about that film was about realism, he's like, I'm going to take it one step further. This thing is being built in orbit by tiny humans.
Yeah.
The realistic thing would be to show it under construction.
Yeah. Well, Kubrick, I mean, not to go too far off topic, but Kubrick's trying to make sure that we know that these are our first steps into to space.
Correct. Yeah. Absolutely. And that perhaps could be a topic for another time. I read a great book about 2 years ago.
Could we go down that rabbit hole?
About 2 years ago, there's a very good book that I recommend to you, which is about the making of 2001. And was really fascinating because some of the effects that you see in 2001, he made himself in a paint factory years before the film came out, just because he thought one day I might have a use for this. And there are a lot of other great bits, and particularly about the interplay between him and Kubrick. How did the movie come about? It's extremely different from the book. Why? There was a lot of tension between the two of them.
Clark and Kubrick?
Kubrick, yeah.
Yeah, Clark wasn't happy with the final product, I've heard.
They were collaborators, but they had different visions. They had agreed on this sort of a very vague concept. And Kubrick went off in a kind of a different direction.
Yeah, like a mystical direction.
So
I don't think Clark had that mystical element as much. Now, maybe I'm wrong.
We should talk about that in a future
let's do that another time.
video, because there's a lot of interesting, rich territory there. Because one of the reasons I love that movie is because it holds up so well
scientifically,
as a film. The effects, it is the granddaddy of every realistic sci-fi film that we've ever seen.
Sure.
It gave birth to them all. It gave big birth to Star Wars. The
Star Child, get it?
So many of the special effects guys that worked, and there were all men that worked in that film, worked on Star Wars.
Yeah.
Which is why they have a very similar look from the vehicles and the complexity and
Yeah.
the fact that things are worn and dirty and seams and baffles are shown on all the exteriors of the ship and so forth.
Yeah, and they're using like the same materials to make the same kind of models. I mean, like it's like um Adam Savage. I was watching him during the lockdown, and he was in his maker's workshop, and he would do these little, like, he'd put up his iPhone and he'd do like a, what we're doing, and he'd show you how to make one. He's like, here's how you can make a Star Wars looking shuttlecraft, super easy. And he'd show you how to do it, and he'd do it in like 10 minutes. And it was like out of like little bits of plastic and some glue, and it was like an old model kit
bashing.
He's like, yeah, exactly. And it was like, but his techniques, like what you do with the X-Acto knife and all this stuff. It was like, he's like, this, you need this kind of glue, because what it'll do is it'll partially melt the plastic and you get this effect, all kinds of neat chemical reactions and things. But it made, and then I'm like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. I've seen that everywhere. Now I know why, because it's simple to do, and it looks great.
Oh yeah. And again, going back to the idea we talked about last time about there's a resolution that a director knows that at a certain distance will not be, you can't discern it with the eye.
Right.
So you can get away with a lot.
But also making things dirty allows that too, because you hide all the imperfections, or you attribute any imperfections to the fact that it's battle damage. In fact, there's a walker, there's an ATST at the end that, that you see that I'm like, wait a minute, that one has like a scar on it. What the heck? It hasn't, we haven't even hit the battle scene yet.
The effects guys called that the chicken walker.
And there's a scar, there's a slash right across it, as if it had been in a previous battle. So the reason for that is because that's the one that Chewie jumps into later. And so if you're following along,
you can
when
tell.
Han is out there with Leia and they're like, oh no, here comes this ATST.
Which is a great moment.
We know, if you've been following along, that that's Chewie's.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, I noticed it this time. So I have to go back and see if it's in the original, but I'll bet it's in the original.
That's a nice moment when you think, wow, the jig is up, that here's a walker that's got superior firepower. They're cooked, and then Chewie pops out. Nice surprise.
Right, which let's talk about that walker firepower thing.
Which they echoed that scene in one of the sequels, one of the Disney sequels.
So is the ATST mainly anti-infantry? Because that's what it does. It just like mows down these Ewoks. In fact, we have that classic Ewok death scene, which I'm sure was very controversial at the time. Do you kill teddy bears? The come on, and then
I like that scene. I like that scene because it's one of the few times in a cartoonish violence sequence that there's any actual consequence.
Yeah.
Because in cartoonish action sequences, nobody you care about dies. But so even if a teddy bear gets killed, you don't really care. But when his friend bends over him and at first he's like, come on, get up, let's go. And then the realization he's dead, then he bends over and he lets out that pitiful, I mean, that's tear jerking,
heart-wrenching. I know it really is. I mean, I have to admit,
well done. It's well done
done.
And I'm a bitterly cynical person.
I took that as a compliment when you said that. When I went like this, that's the cynical answer. I was like, yes, coming from a cynical man, that is a high praise indeed.
But that little Ewok death scene where he lets out that cry, it does tug at you.
So go ahead.
I was just going to say that the commentary, they talk about the fact that Lucas says he was very concerned that people wouldn't take this battle seriously because, come on, teddy bears, they're armed with spears and rope against an advanced technological force. It's going to be a slaughter. And he says, and that's what happens, that in that battle, they're really not terribly successful. They score a couple good hits. There's the two logs come down and smash the chicken walker. There's another one where they managed to trip another one. But on the whole,
that's the one I was going to talk about.
On the whole, they're getting beat up.
So there's those chicken walkers are so overpowered, right? There's not the defensive, like when Chewie gets in one and shoots the one from behind, there's obviously very limited armor on the back. I mean, most tanks have limited armor on their back. Anyway, you're not supposed to put your back to the enemy, but it just like two shots, man, that thing blows up. So I'm assuming that like the guns are the main thing. It's not about the armor. It's about the guns, right? So the guns are the main thing. It's just a gun platform. So yeah, it's got some
That
armor.
makes sense.
It's got some like protective armor for the crew, but really it's not about like going into heavy battle. It's about shooting weak targets. So when the chicken walker does get tripped by the rolling logs, which how long did it take them in advance to like cut all these logs, and how did they know? But let's not go there. So they do that. The chicken walker goes, and as soon as it falls over, boom! It's like a Yosemite, a Wile E. Coyote cartoon.
It's a trope. It's a trope. Like, it's just like the Simpsons trope of anytime a car goes off the road, it just explodes.
Explodes, right? Yeah, exactly. It's awesome, but it's just so funny,
But presumably, they're not built to withstand a collapse. They fall completely over. So I'll give them that. And it's nice.
I love it.
It gives them a little. It gives them a little victory, and the stop motion that they had to use to get it to do the very awkward. We're trying to balance on the logs.
Yeah, that must have been really crazy. In fact, there is in the credits. There is a stop motion. Like there's one guy stop motion something. One person. It was probably that scene. And and there are others, I'm sure, but that one in particular probably got him the solo credit. When I like the hang glider, I like the one that's hang gliding. He drops a rock on top of it, and it just goes boom, boom. It does nothing, which is awesome because that's right. That's what it should do.
Because they're really,
And then they're very effective. Out of the sky and
if it wasn't for the fact that their only job was to create enough delay to set charges inside the base station for the force field generator.
Right.
If they were actually in a battle and that was the only objective, they would have been just slaughtered.
Yeah.
But it comes close to parody initially when they just start banging on the heads of the stormtroopers with sticks, and the stormtroopers do what stormtroopers are designed to do in Star Wars, which is basically fall down.
Right.
And that part's not super believable, but okay. All right. So that's what Lucas does voice, the fact that he was concerned that there would be a lot of rejection of these cutesy characters, and two, that they wouldn't be credible as a force against the Empire. But he seems to kind of thread the needle a bit. I still don't like their presence in the movie. It takes the weight off of the movie. It's like this lighthearted, super young kid friendly middle of the movie that I could live without.
So there's one dark element to the Ewoks that has to be addressed.
Okay, what's that?
Do Ewoks eat human flesh?
Sure.
Yeah, they're going to roast Han, and they're going to roast Luke, right? On a spit.
Sure, why not? I mean, I'm sure there are lots of animals on Endor that are larger than Ewoks, that they're clearly clever enough to trap large animals. They have tree snares. Why not?
So now it's a really tough question. At the end of the movie, they have all of the helmets of the stormtroopers lined up at the festival, and they're playing on them, right?
They've clearly killed those people.
Did Wedge, did Luke, did these guys, did they eat the stormtrooper meat at the festival?
Wow. So I'm gonna say no, and for two reasons. I don't think that they would have, when Han and the others were on the poles, tied up to be on a spit. I don't think they would have been eaten, because the Ewoks are clearly used to eating larger animals, but not sentient animals. And the Ewoks are sentient. They have a language. They would certainly recognize that in others. So I even though they were tied up, I don't think the ultimate aim, I don't think they would have eaten them.
Well, they're just going to burn them?
That's what you're led to believe.
C-3PO says you are going to be the main course of a banquet in my honor.
Yeah. I don't know.
I know we're not supposed to go there. I know.
Well,
we're not.
No, wait.
It's supposed to be humorous.
We're going there because it is humorous, but we already said we're going to treat this like a documentary.
Right.
That's the fun of it.